The Camp Scott case taught America, and the world, more than fear, no place is truly completely safe. Children need to be more carefully protected, especially in remote, isolated areas. Never ignore strange signs. The day before the murder, someone broke in and left a death threat, but the organizers dismissed it as a prank. If someone warns you, listen. Justice isn't always fair. Although Hart was convicted on multiple counts, the legal system can't convict without physical evidence, and that's a fatal flaw. Imagine this: your child happily walks into the camp, carrying a small suitcase, waving to her mother, "I'll tell you everything." She smiles and runs off. 3 days later, you get a call from the police: "Sorry, your daughter is gone." Camp Scott was never reopened. The camp was abandoned, covered in moss, and the Camp Girl Scouts signs had fallen into pieces over the years. Once a childhood paradise, now a place no one dares to enter after dusk. The 3 girls' tentmate, who survived because she slept a few meters away, suffered from survivor's guilt for the rest of her life. "I heard a whistling sound," she said. "But I thought it was the wind. If I had woken up, I might have called for help, or maybe I would have died." In 1981, a flower garden named the Three Angels was erected in a local park. 3 small angel statues, each with the face of a girl. Every year, families, friends, and thousands of former Girl Scouts gather to light candles, recount memories, and keep those 3 names alive. In 2022, modern DNA technology allows retesting of semen samples collected at the scene, and the results: Jean Leroy Hart is not ruled out as the source of the DNA, but it is not enough to confirm 100%, because the sample is badly decomposed, the police announced. Although Hart died in prison in 1979 of a heart attack, while serving another sentence, we believe he was the killer. However, the old court ruling has not been changed. On paper, the case still has no official conviction. In March 1979, Jean Leroy Hart went to trial charged with murder of Lori Lee Farmer, age 8, murder of Michelle Guzza, age 9, murder of Denise Milner, age 10, and 3 counts of rape, kidnapping, and aggravated assault of a minor. The prosecution presented evidence that shoe prints matched those at the scene, semen at the scene had the right blood type, ties and items matched those found in Hart's cabin, but there was a fatal flaw: DNA technology did not exist at the time. Identifying the killer based on blood type and deduction could be completely rejected. Hart's defense attorney argued the shoe prints were not authentic enough because they could have come from anywhere. Hart had no clear motive, there were no witnesses, no cameras, no DNA, and most importantly, Hart had many defenders who claimed he was elsewhere on the night of the murder. Finally, in horror and division, the jury declared Jean Leroy Hart not guilty of 3 counts of murder. When the verdict was read, the parents of the 3 girls almost collapsed in court. One mother stood up, saying in despair, "My child died so painfully, and they let him walk away like nothing happened?" But Lori's mother, Sherry Farmer, quietly held her husband's hand and said, "Now she can rest in peace, but I never will." Police checked hundreds of homes, searched every crevice in the woods, but Hart still seemed to have evaporated from the world. How could a man hide for so long, or was someone protecting him? The media asked. In April 1978, nearly 10 months after the murder, the police raided a cabin in the woods. Jean Leroy Hart was inside. He did not resist. The cabin contained pornographic magazines, zip ties, flashlights, and many items identical to the Camp Scott crime scene. He was immediately taken into custody and charged with first-degree murder. When Hart appeared in court, a storm of public opinion divided the United States. One side believed he was a jungle devil who should be executed immediately. Another side believed the police blamed him because of his skin color, because of his criminal past, without clear evidence. During the first hearing, the mother of one of the 3 victims fainted, as attorney Hart sneered and said, My client could not have killed anyone. He is a victim of the media. Police began a massive investigation, interviewing hundreds of people, from camp staff, local residents, to prisoners with rape records. One name emerged as a nightmare: an escaped prisoner convicted of raping 2 women with small children. He blindfolded the mother, raped her in front of the child, and fled. He had been missing from the prison for 4 years, and no one had ever found him. Hart had grown up near Camp Scott, knew the terrain, lived in the woods, and had a great survival instinct. He was the perfect man for a case like this. But for the first time, there was no physical evidence to catch him. In the weeks that followed, the police collected a series of terrifying clues. A handwritten notebook found in the woods, detailing tents, times, and numbers of people, like an attack plan. An anonymous letter to the police, reading, "You will never find me. I am the ghost of Locust Forest." A resident reported seeing a figure moving near the Camp Scott fence, but thought it was a night counselor and dismissed it. Footprints from the scene matched Hart's shoe size. The case began to veer from a rape-murder case into a dangerous, jungle-wide manhunt. When Jean Leroy Hart was officially named as the prime suspect, more than 300 law enforcement officers were mobilized: police, dogs, reconnaissance planes. All converged on Locust Grove, but Hart disappeared like a ghost. Rumors were that he had help from the natives, because he was Cherokee, and the local community did not believe he did it. 6 months passed. The 3 children murdered in the Camp Scott case were: 1. Lori Lee Farmer, 8 years old, the youngest child in the group, intelligent, gentle, loved animals. Her dream was to become a biologist. 2. Doris Denise Milner, 10 years old, the only black girl in the tent, who was hesitant to go to summer camp, but her mother encouraged her. Denise was a good student, ambitious, and always took care of her friends. Michelle Heather Guza, 9 years old, a lively girl, loved to tell stories, was the first person to volunteer to attend summer camp. She wrote a letter to her mother just one day before she died. 3 children, 3 fates, 3 unfinished childhood dreams. Their deaths were not just a murder. It was a knife slashing into the heart of America. When police arrived at 10:08, they found blood stains from inside the tent to the edge of the woods, indicating that the children had been dragged out. The victims had been gagged with duct tape, their hands and feet bound with shoelaces and bandages, showing signs of rape before being beaten to death. A flashlight of unknown ownership was lying next to the bodies, which later became an important clue. Strange traces in the mud suggested that the killer had probably been watching the camp for days, and knew exactly which tents were the most deserted, the furthest, and the most vulnerable to attack. The most chilling detail: one of the 3 children was still alive when he was dragged from the tent, trying to crawl towards the camp lights. But no one heard him. A week earlier, the camp had been broken into at night. Someone lost things in their backpack, papers were rummaged through, a counselor found a scrawled threat: "I'm going to kill the kids." But the camp administrators thought it was a prank by local teenagers. They didn't call the police, they didn't increase security, they didn't move the tents. And then the rainy night came. The killer returned, this time not as a prank. When the news spread, the whole country was shocked. No one could have imagined that a children's summer camp, a place of absolute safety, would become the scene of a mass rape and murder. Parents cried and rushed to Camp Scott to find their children. Some were so frightened that they didn't dare step out of their tents. Many campers were traumatized for life, never forgetting the eyes of their departed friends. "My daughter went to summer camp to grow up, not to die in a tent," a mother said through tears. No cameras, no phones, no alarms. The killer struck in the dark, disappearing like a ghost. All that remained: 3 innocent girls, a summer camp that had been closed forever, and an unanswered haunting. On the night of June 12, 1977, it was raining heavily. The rain was like a curtain that covered all sounds. In the sound of the rain and the thick darkness, a dark figure moved silently between the tents. At around 2 a.m., some campers in tent number 8 said they heard a small sobbing sound, like someone was crying. One even said that it sounded like someone opened the tent and walked in. But the girls just pulled their blankets tighter, because of the rain, because of the cold, and because no one expected anything bad to happen in this place. When morning came, Camp Scott was still quiet, damp from the rain, but no one expected the 3 children to not wake up. Cleaning staff member found a bloody sleeping bag dumped next to a trail and immediately called the manager. When they arrived at 10:08, the police found a horrific scene: a torn, bloody mattress, shoelaces tied together, signs of handcuffs, a raincoat partially covering a body, shoe prints deep in the mud, leading from the tent into the woods. No one heard the screams, no one saw the strange flashlight beam, no one suspected anything. Until it was too late. After the case, some camp counselors admitted that there had been many signs of unusual behavior, but no one expected the worst-case scenario. Imagine you are a 9-year-old girl, summer is starting, and you are excitedly packing your backpack, grabbing your flashlight, coloring books, and favorite blanket. You board the bus with other girls, equally excited, equally laughing, to begin your first summer vacation without your parents. That is Camp Scott, a children's camp that has been open since the 1920s, located deep in the Locust Grove Forest in Oklahoma. With more than 410 acres of forest, the camp has more than a dozen tents, where Girl Scouts from all over come to learn survival skills, make friends, and grow up. This place used to be the summer dream of thousands of girls. Campers described Camp Scott before the murders as follows: no one locked the doors, children ran free, camp counselors were both friends and protectors, friendly and funny. Girls bathed in streams, learned to tie ropes, and played treasure hunts in the woods. Even tent number 8, where the tragedy later occurred, was considered the most beautiful location, close to the edge of the forest, cool, quiet. No one expected it to be the most isolated, a paradise that doesn't need a lock. But there's no lock to keep evil out. Everyone in the camp was called to assemble, and Camp Scott was immediately locked down. Just a few hours before, the whole camp had been filled with laughter, the telling of ghost stories on a rainy night, and the singing of little girls. Now, there was only haunting silence. No one heard a scream. No one saw anything strange. The killer had quietly entered tent 8, raped each child, and then murdered them in the dark. How could this be? There were 140 girls in the camp that night. There were 7 campers in the same area. There were adults guarding. The light from flashlights was dim, and the rain was pouring down. Why did no one know what was happening? Not even the children sleeping just meters away from tent 8? After sealing off the scene, the police and forensics team began to gather clues. They discovered the following horrifying things: a trail of blood stretching from the tent to the edge of the forest, a flashlight lying next to the sleeping bag, with strange handprints, a large shoe print in the wet ground, not belonging to anyone in the camp, and that was it. When they looked through the diaries of several counselors, they found, a week earlier, several counselors had reported strange screeching noises at night. One said her belongings had been ransacked, and someone had scrawled "I will kill a child" on a page in her backpack. Everyone thought it was a cruel joke. No one expected the threat to come true. Summer 1977. Hundreds of girls from across Oklahoma gathered at Camp Scott, a popular camp for the Girl Scouts of America, with birds chirping in the trees and white tents spread out in the green woods. It was once a symbol of innocence and carefree childhood, but overnight, everything came crashing down. On June 13, 1977, at 6 a.m., a camp staffer was walking along a trail near the restrooms. The sky was still overcast, the remnants of last night's storm making the ground wet and eerily quiet. Then he saw something, a sleeping bag lying on the side of the road, covered in mud. At first he thought it was something he had forgotten, but when he got closer, he stopped dead. Inside was the body of a little girl, covered in blood and cold. The police were called immediately. 2 other bodies were found, not far away, in even more horrific conditions: raped, brutally beaten with a hard object, strangled to death. The 3 victims were identified as Lori Lee Farmer, age 8, Michelle Heather Guza, age 9, Doris Denise Milner, age 10. The 3 unfortunate girls came from different cities in Oklahoma. They were in the same tent that night, in tent number 8, located at the edge of the woods, the furthest from all the tents at Camp Scott.